Our next guest is a writer, performer, and post-it note artist. Her superpowers include the ability to smoke just one cigarette and not want more, communicating with small animals, and using public transportation, but not all at the same time. Please give it up for Jay Palmer.
There we go. Thank you. If I was born a boy, I would have been named Alexander Samuel Cohen, after my paternal grandfather, Samuel Alexander Cohen, who died a decade before I was born. Jessica, which is what the J stands for, isn't a family name. It was simply in fashion the year I was born. As a child, I was often referred to by my first name and the first initial of my last name, Jessica C., to distinguish me from all the other Jessicas born the same year. My dad, who had a soft spot for French cuisine, would sometimes joke about what I would have been named if I'd been a boy. We considered naming you snails and garlic butter, he'd say, or sauteed frog's legs. Sometimes I asked Dad if he wished that I had been born a boy. He always said no, that girls were better than boys because, according to him, girls stuck with their fathers and boys abandoned them. I coveted the ease with which boys walked through the world, the alarming way they talked back to teachers, the allowances that were made for their destructive tendencies, and the way they played with each other, deliberately, enthusiastically, physically, throwing objects into the air and body-checking each other. I eschewed lacy dresses, avoided baths, and I had no interest in dolls. I preferred to wear overalls and kept the company of roughhousing boys. And when I did play with girls, I was inevitably cast as the husband when we played house. It requires one line. Honey, I'm home. It's such an easy role. My curly hair became an unmanageable nest of tangles, and nobody knew how to tame it. Unlike my mother and my sister, who had smooth, shiny hair, I had inherited my father's ferocious locks, and I tried desperately to brush them straight, which resulted only in increasing the volume and inflating the texture. My unruly mane was, I decided, a result of not washing and brushing my hair the way a girl was supposed to, and my inability to correct it through periodic bouts of intensive brushing was evidence that I had reached the point of no return. There would be no dainty portraits of me dressed in a tutu and ballerina shoes, no princess Halloween costumes, no baby dolls and toy strollers. I was, by my calculations, at least half boy, and my hair was proof. One day, when I was 7, I took a step stool into the bathroom, climbed to the top of it, looked at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror, and brought a pair of scissors to my head. My handiwork resulted in an emergency trip to my mom's hairdresser, who gave me the shortest haircut I'd had since birth. Lacking any secondary sex characteristics, I looked like a boy. The fact that people called me Jessie aided in the deception. So much depends on that lowercase I, detectable only in print. My gender cover was so effective that my friend Annie, who wore ribbons in her hair and played with Barbie dolls, managed to convince a boy at school named Mark that I was a boy too. When he believed her, she further convinced him that as he and I were both boys, we should show each other our penises. Annie had a little brother and had witnessed such behavior. I did not contradict Annie's assertions and went along with the ruse. I allowed Mark to lead me into a bathroom where he unzipped his pants, pulled his limp, pale penis out of his underwear and said, "See?" The thing in Mark's hand looked like a grub worm. I was not disgusted, frightened, or impressed. Rather, looking at it gave me a sense of power, of having successfully pulled off an undercover operation, of transgressing a boundary of deceit. I loped out of the bathroom, leaving Mark with his penis in hand, having exposed nothing of myself. Mark continued to believe I was a boy, until finally, humiliatingly, he was enlightened. His only defense was, I thought she was a boy. My best friend during those years was a boy. Gabby and I were fiercely protective of each other. When it was time to leave Gabby's house, he'd intercept, physically blocking my mom's path with outstretched arms and yelling, "No!" I reciprocated the gesture when Gabby's mom came to pick him up from my house. This generally led to an extended waiting period where our mothers would catch up over a cup of coffee at the kitchen table, the two of us bursting with triumph over the success of our delay tactics. Gabby's father once described our first play date to me, which took place when we were 3 years old. We descended into the basement of Gabby's house, where there was an awesome toy train set that covered the entire basement floor. Gabby's father stayed upstairs in the kitchen, where he could hear sounds of destruction coming up from under the floorboards. Worried for our safety, he checked in and found us stark naked, clothes strewn haphazardly around the room, holding train parts above our heads and stomping around in circles like naked baby Godzillas. Provided we were indoors and in one of our respective homes, Gabby and I regularly shed our clothes in each other's presence as if it were a common childhood ritual, which perhaps it is. We did everything together. We bathed together, we slept in each other's bedrooms, and we went to school together. When we were 8 years old, the students in our class were given the choice of either making a tie-dyed garment or carving something from balsa wood. I joined Gabby and the rest of the boys in carving balsa wood. All the other girls opted for tie-dye. Gabby made it competitive by chanting, "Yay for balsa wood, boo for tie-dye," over and over. The girls I played with knew there was something different about me, but lacking the vocabulary to name it, they called me sexy, which stood in for all the ways that I didn't match their Barbie playing, ballet class taking, imaginary tea party having lifestyles. My friend Annie led the charge, composing a taunt that caught on with the other girls that went, "Jessica Cohen, the sexy girl, likes to call her muff a pearl." She created one from Gabby, too, that went, "Gabriel Hoskins, the sexy boy, likes to call his penis a toy." Why she created a euphemism for vagina but not penis is not entirely clear. Perhaps it's related to the fact that my transgression was greater than Gabby's. I pretended to be a boy, and his only crime was befriending a girl who pretended to be a boy. I've given some thought to her assertion that I liked to call mine a pearl, and although there are sexual connotations attached to oysters and pearls, I doubt she was aware of that at the time. Gabby and I slept over in each other's bedrooms until I was 9 years old, when my parents split and we moved away to Brooklyn. Gabby and his family moved to DC a couple years later. Those couple years had changed us. Our bodies had morphed from the ambiguous landscape of childhood to the brink of puberty. And when Mom and I visited them at their house in the suburbs, Gabby's mom said to mine, in a tone that implied I wasn't in the room, "She's obviously not sleeping in Gabby's room tonight." On that particular visit, surrounded by Gabby and his male friends, I was treated so much like a boy that they didn't hesitate to tune into a soft-core TV channel in my presence. The picture came in scrambled. Watching a clear signal required payment. Regardless, the boys were transfixed by what they could decipher and filled in the missing parts of the moving image themselves. I studied those boys like an anthropologist, observing the changes in their breathing, the way their mouths hung slightly open, the glassy way they stared at the screen as they watched the suggestion of a couple engaged in the rudimentaries of fucking. They excused themselves one at a time to go to the bathroom, where they were no doubt furiously masturbating. I too was transfixed by the on-screen images, having only ever seen such direct suggestions of sex in late-night phone chat commercials that featured scantily clad women holding phone receivers to their ears, glossy lips seductively parted, and never showing the men on the other side of the phone connection. Gabby and I did end up sleeping in the same room that night, despite his mother's directive, but nothing sexual came of it. A year or so later, during a joint family vacation, I was sent to Gabby's room one morning with instructions to wake him. We ended up in a wrestling match, a not uncommon activity in our relationship, but this time, Gabby pinned me on my back and wouldn't let me go. No words were exchanged, but I knew that the intent had changed when he resisted my attempts to lift my arms from the ground, the weight of his pelvis firmly resting on mine, staring out at me from underneath a haze of hormones. As hormone-addled as I was myself, I could not bring myself to make the adjustment from thinking of Gabby as my best friend to thinking of him as a means to exercise adolescent sexual frustration. I continued to resist his grip until the moment for potential acquiescence passed. He decreased the intensity of his hold on me. I rolled out from underneath him, righted myself on the floor, and exited the room. The moment marked the definitive end of my ability to pass as a boy, and our friendship never recovered. At subsequent joint family vacations, I observed Gabby's life from the sidelines. He'd invite new friends, male friends, who he'd form short-lived bands with and cultishly watch and rewatch The Blues Brothers, a film that unabashedly celebrates the experience of fraternity and share secrets that I was no longer privy to. I was jealous of his male friendships and tried to ply him with nostalgia. Remember the time we went into the woods near your house and pretended to be cowboys, I'd ask? Or remember the great frog catching expedition of 1977? At most I'd get, yeah. The gender cover I enjoyed as a kid doesn't work anymore. The closest I get to passing as something else is when I shop at Cermak Produce and the clerk tells me my total in Spanish. It gives me a thrill because it aligns with my belief that you can't tell who a person is just by looking, and allows for the possibility that I might speak Spanish, even if I don't. While I've come to inhabit my body with relative comfort, there are residual markers of my tomboy past. It is not uncommon for people to make assumptions about my sexuality based on the way I present myself. And to my husband's perpetual horror, I still can't sit like a girl. I have to think about how wide my legs splay when in polite company and tend to wear shorts underneath skirts and dresses for that very reason. The experience of being short-haired, sexually ambiguous Jessie gave me insight into what it meant to pass as a boy. The nonchalance that took over my body as it moved through space, not stepping lightly so as to leave no trace, but solidly planting my feet on the earth beneath me as if it were my birthright. The memory of it is charged with electricity. I had deceived the world into believing that the male entitlement I was trying on for size rightfully belonged to me, and I loved it. Thank you.